Thank you all. Oh my gosh, I got to tell you, I've been working in professional ministry at various churches for various different denominations for 25 years now, and this is one of the most thoughtful, engaged, just amazing groups of people that I've had the pleasure of doing small group conversation with. So
you're welcome.
You should all give yourself you are actually a very special group of folks, and I think that I've been humbled in all of the different things that I've learned about this community since I've been here for 7 months now. Wow, amazing. Really quickly, I believe you all know why we're here. It's because we're talking about establishing a center, a cultural center, a spiritual center. Reverend Latifah is going to talk about that a little bit more here in just a second, at First UUPB. But why? Why is this something that is on our minds? Why do we see this as a vision for a possible future going forward? And this is actually something I can speak to regardless of being Unitarian Universalist or not, because this is a trend amongst all religious systems, not just Christian denominations, but any religious group in America. As a matter of fact, I actually had to do some research about this for funding for a project that I'm working on right now, and so I looked it up. According to Pew Research polls, in 2003, 138 million Americans identified themselves as religious. That would be 41% of the population. And in this terms, that would be people attending religious services on a regular basis. So that's 41% of the population. In 2013, that number went down to 131 million that attended services. That's 39% of the population. And in 2023, the latest number was 104 million people identified as attending religious services. So that's 31% of the American population. So we're not just talking like, a downward slope of attendance. We're talking about like just exponential drop in attendance. And I think that it's because there's been a paradigm shift in how people engage in religious systems. For years and years and years in America, we had this model of basically the village parish, right? The town church. And that was where people would gather for socialization along with religious instruction and stuff like that. Since the advent of communication, as we know it in the 20th century and going forward, so even going as far back as radio, people have started to be able to find religious education and even groups and belonging outside of traditional models. So even as we were heading towards sort of record attendance at churches and stuff like that in the 50s and 60s, once people were able to start forming community outside of religious institutions, all bets were off, right? And so you can sort of see that, and especially with the advent of technology like the internet, people are able to find belonging in all sorts of different ways, in ways that they don't necessarily need religious systems for. Now, what I have found in my work, and like I said, I've been doing this, since, I started campus ministry work at UNC Greensboro in 2000, 2001. So what I've seen is that the folks that are led and called and have hunger for religious community don't necessarily need it delivered in the way that it's been delivered in the model that it has been for so long. Just like Jesse was saying, Sunday morning services isn't necessarily where people find their belonging, right? And here's the other thing, and I think that this is generational, and I think that it's specifically for Generation X and younger. We've progressively grown up in an American society that's much more capitalistic and much more marketed to. Mm-hmm. My generation especially has been sold things constantly. And our identity has tried to be linked to what it is that we buy, right? If you think about the Coke Pepsi wars, if you think about like all of these things, it's like it's constant marketing, and it's constantly as constant selling. And I think that religious institutions got into the game of marketing and selling in a way that made an entire generation and younger skeptical of what it was that they were saying. Because I think instead of offering authentic relationships, what we were being sold were fancy programs, and stuff like that were going to sort of save the church or whatever. Ultimately, at the end of the day, people who are called to some sort of spiritual pursuit or religious growth, or even just sort of belonging in community, what they're looking for is a place where they can be their authentic selves and where they can engage in honest relationships with other people. And that can be a church, that can be Compass Center, that can be the Jewish Center that's opening up in Palm Beach Gardens. Like, that can be all kinds of places. But what I think that we've seen in the religious community over the last few years is that those groups can form in lots of different places, around lots of different ideas, in lots of different times. And so the ability to have a cultural center gives you the flexibility to host different groups at different times during the week that give people an opportunity to come together and form those key relationships in honest ways with other people. So what I'm saying is that this idea of the center, this idea of the cultural center, the spiritual center, this is actually the future of what the church is going to look like. This is what most churches are going to look like 100 years from now. They're going to be cultural centers, because that's how people are going to find belonging in community, is through these things. And I think that what we're proposing, is sort of on the cutting edge of what churches are going to be. And that kind of makes sense that the UUs would be at the forefront of this, right? Because we're sort of thinking rationally about what it is that's happening. We're not trying to hold on to old models just for the sake of holding on to them. And so I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Latifah, because she's been sort of exploring this vision of what a cultural center looks like. But I just wanted to lay the groundwork of why. Why a cultural center? It's because this is what it's becoming. This is kind of what it is, and it's definitely what it will be. So, here you go.
Great. Thank you, Greg. So Greg is right. Church is changing, and every meeting or conference I attend, that's what we're talking about. Are we going to do ministry different? We all have to acknowledge that we're all ministers here. You're all a part. If you're a part of the community and the congregation, you are ministering. Okay. So early in 2024, I responded to a request put out by Beloved Conversations in Meadville, Lombard. That's one of our Unitarian Universalist seminaries. And they put out a request for spiritual innovators to be a part of a year-long process of creating, collaborating, exploring what's the next thing for Unitarian Universalism. How do we integrate these changes that are happening around us in our ministries? So in the call, it said that there's $200,000 earmarked for Florida projects. So I thought, why not? We got to jump on this for a number of reasons. One, like Greg said, or Kai said, folks don't know that we exist. Unitarian Universalism. I know in the Black community, folks look at me like I have 10 heads, but they have the same values. They have the same similar beliefs, but they don't know that we exist. So there's this idea that church, congregations, fellowships are sort of outdated words. So we just need to strategize. It's not, this is a separate thing from the church. I want to be clear about that. Our congregation tends to be inward focused, building spiritual practices and spirituality, where this love center is going to be more outward focused. We want to reach the people that we're not reaching. And we do that by programming, by offering programming. And so we've been discussing money in our circles, and when David and Greg and I meet, how are we going to fund this? We want to do some great things. We have numbers to back it up. We know there's a mental health crisis in this county. We know there's a homelessness crisis in town. We know LGBTQIA folks are being marginalized. How do we help these folks? How do we get in on this, right? And so we discussed a timeline. We discussed the idea that this would be a progressive, liberal, spiritual community, this love center. And when we do that, we can say we're allies and advocates working together for change. And I think when folks hear those buzzwords, allies and advocates, oh, I want to be a part of that. Because now I can do something. And I'm doing it with folks in the community, not necessarily a religious community, but community. And so that's where we're headed. There's money, we're going to apply for funding. There's numerous sources. There's a Shelter Rock Church that has funding. There's the UU funding administration. So there's a few different funding sources that we have that we're going to apply for. And if you're also feeling generous, you can donate to our cause. But I just want to talk a little bit about a soft launch. You want to talk about that? So here's what we're thinking. Okay.
I have handouts on all this. I figured I'd hand out afterwards.
Okay.
We're not kinda-
So the first round of funding is due March 31st. So we're going to do our best to try and get something together, an application together for
First round of funding?
for funding. Yeah. And so in June, April, we're going to provide a proof of concept. So we'll do this presentation again to the congregation. And then we'll continue to communicate with them and solicit input, and we need an advisory committee. So think about that. Do you want to help this center get off the ground?
Yes.
Right? Thank you, guys. I love it. July through August, we're
I was on the list.
okay. Good. Carrie?
I'm in.
Good. Okay. July through August, we're talking about marketing and promotion. So now we've identified the programs and the support resources that we want to do. Now we need to advertise it. What does that look like? Well, we need to put it on the internet. We need to do Facebook. We need to do Instagram, all of those things. And by September, Greg and I will be very busy. And so if you'd like to help us, please do, because you all have skills. And so think about this. We need 3 solid programs. We're going to offer 3 counseling or support resources. And then we're going to have 3 action-focused items. Now, these are things we already do, minus the counseling. We'll do that at Minister Mondays. But these are things we already do. We have action-focused activities through JAM and Peace. We have solid programming, right? What we're trying to do now is get more funding so we can do more of it. That's what this is about. Getting funding, seeing if it works, incorporating, and making it its own thing. So that there's no competition between First UU PB and the Love Center at UU PB. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So, and then there's plenty of opportunities like the Compass Center has here, rental opportunities, things we're already doing. So we're not trying to take away anything. We're trying to parse out how we do ministry, right? We're trying to be a bit more outward focused while still nurturing ourselves.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point, something that Kai said, and it's something that we've talked about too, which is that First UUPB is very much a community that we love, and it's a community that we program for. I know I work hard to program things. Reverend Latifah works hard. And those are the people sitting at this table. What we're doing is we're creating programs for the people that aren't here yet, right? It's those people that we're creating programs for. So it's really 2 communities that we're serving. We're serving First UUPB, and we're serving the folks that aren't here yet. And that's where the community center really comes in. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then in September, we will reapply again to the UU Fund program. They have a deadline at the end of September. And then in 2026, depending on how well or not this Love Center performs, we may be talking about incorporating, right? Being its own 501c3 so that it doesn't compete with the church and that we have a little bit more leverage in how we operate because it's not a religious community per se. Does that make sense?
Are we doing Q&A now, or do we wait till after the recording's done?
Yeah, I have a couple more things that I can say a little bit if I
You got
can.
it,
Or
yep.
Greg can talk a little
Did I
bit
miss
about
something?
some of the programming ideas, like what, maybe some of the examples are good to show like, what would it be that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, we were kicking around some ideas, you know, but again, like, we don't want to get too far in the weeds of like specifics. I mean, we're really at the big planning stages, but even ideas that I had for first UUPB, I started to reevaluate. Well, wait, who are the people that we're looking to take advantage of this? So, for instance, Ebony and I were talking about like opportunities that we can do for kids. And in a conversation that we had, I had suggested, well, what if we offered like an after-school programming, something where like we can do an hour of homework and an hour of some kind of structured something like yoga or something like that for kids that, you know, for parents that need a place to drop off their kids, but they want it to be sort of progressive, socially mindful, things like that, right? So that's already a conversation that we had. But as we were talking about the center, I was like, wait, that's exactly who we're talking about. We're talking about people that aren't here yet, outwardly focused, looking to bring folks in. So that's actually kind of a center type idea more than it is the first UUPB idea. It's a bridge idea that hopefully invites people to our campus, and they are certainly welcome to participate in our community. But it's also it is a center style idea, right? So something like that is what we're talking about when we're talking about, you know, facing two different ways. The programs that we currently offer, News Talk, Sacred Text Reading, Wisdom Walk, Day with Death, those are really sort of internal programs meant to build up the community that we have. When we're talking about center offerings, we're talking about who's not here yet and what are they looking for and how can we meet that need. Yeah, so things like an after-school program, stuff like that.
Question? Oh, David?
I asked a question, maybe we'll answer some of the questions.
Okay.
Okay, maybe question.
I thought you were going to talk first.
I was.
Yeah, so then you have it recorded, yeah.
Thank you both. The vision and the creativity, I think, is really helpful. And I'm glad, Greg, that we found you and you. I think the past couple of years of building our base to launch, we are so ready for this. You know, I know when we looked to hiring our current round of staff, it was, we are so ready for what's next after COVID. Like, we want to launch, and I think we're at the beginning of a really great journey. And we met this week to plan, and part of the timeline was basically, you know, this is a long-term project, and it is kind of a big shift. So it's like a 2-3 year building and programming and evaluating, and then seeing where it is, which will also inform, I think, our getting to the stage of having to look at a 5 or 10 year plan for a strategic vision and strategic planning. I mean, in my mind, I'm like, let's go big or go home.
Yes.
Our space, you know, if you look at Ministers Hall and the Emerson building, that space may not facilitate kind of what this could grow into. So 10 years, we could hopefully build a whole new building, you know, and be a community center. So there's just so many possibilities with this. So to specifically say about the funding, and because that's a big thing, but there's so much that we already are. Like the questions they ask in this book here, where I was like, what do you want to do for a ministry? We have one, you know, so it's really expanding and building on it. I have handouts, number one, of this schedule of the timeline, but the other handout on the one side has the fund for the UU program. That's the funding application that's due first, has, you know, specific questions that you need to put in your proposal. So the three of us have been drafting it, and this is what's going to be next with an advisory committee, is writing out the proposal, drafting it, and then at our annual meeting in April, being able to bring the whole congregation in with a clear vision of this is what it is. Are we all on board with this? You know, how are we going to make it work? So some of the questions are, you know, kind of come up with the goals and the outcomes, timelines, specific plans for raising income. How do we plan to sustain the project? How will this project strengthen and or grow UU its ideas, influence, or its organization, naming our individuals and how we're going to do it, and then our evaluation plan. So it's going to force us to really drill down and think through every aspect of this before we get into it, which is really key. And it might turn into something completely different once we start it and go, oh, that program's not working. Because it's really like the people that are not here, what are people looking for in our community and what do they need? What we think, I do this at work all the time, what I think, I do a lot with older adults and LGBTQ older adults. Oh, this is a great program idea. They should have this. Well, I use that word should, but then nobody shows up and it doesn't work. And I'm like, oh, that's what I wanted to do for the community, but they don't need it. That's the secret sauce of like tapping into the world. And then the other side of the sheet, the whole idea of, we call it the Love Center, the center. When the board was at our retreat in August, the UUA had just adopted the Love at the Center concept, where love is at the center of our principles around it. And so we were like, okay, love at the center at UUPD, we are at the center, the love, and then there's love there. And the questions I just have here, who are the people who are not here yet? Where can they go to find love and community? Mm-hmm. And we talked a lot about, especially a lot of conversations today about the political crossroads, or where are we at this moment in time, and where do people find a safe space? Where do they find community? They don't know what to do. People don't know what to do. They don't know where to start. They want to know how they can help. So we are building the answer to that, to invite them in and be part of it. We kind of described it as, and then I was like, we are the epicenter of Trumpland. I mean, we are literally in Palm Beach County, and Trump lives here. To my mind, that is brilliant for funding asking, because progressive organizations and nonprofits that want to do social services, we're kind of like right in the battleground, and we're so needed here in Florida. Mm-hmm. Not to mention what, before Trump with DeSantis. So kind of using that as an ask, that we're standing up for resistance, we're going to take a strong stance, we're going to speak up, show up on that side, but also we're a refuge, the safe space, the inclusive, the progressive, and the allyship and advocacy. So I'll hand these out, and I'm really excited, and I'm really glad for today. I thought today was really wonderful to kind of launch this. The board's been talking about it, we've been talking about it, and now this is like the circle is growing wider, which is great. So I guess we can have Q&A now. You guys get Chris Julius, he asked first.
So two things. One, grants are notoriously chicken and egg, and what I mean by that is they don't want to give money for you to start doing something. They'd rather give you money for something that you're already doing and building it up. And here's kind of an example of that. A lot of the grant money that Michael talked about, stuff they were doing and they grew it, or they were doing something adjacent to it and grew into that. So when we apply in March, you said, the first application, let's focus on March 31st. So let's focus on some of the stuff that we are already doing and growing, not, oh, we think this is a great idea, we want to do it, right? So I want to be cognizant of that. The other thing, and as a board member, yes, we talked about being on the side of love, love this, love this. Out and out calling this the Love Center, that gives me a big pause. I didn't know we had settled on that as a name.
We didn't. It's
okay.
just not, we've just been using that that's a whole nother part of this advisory committee and the developing of the structure, is we need to decide that, but we've been using it as a working name.
Okay. Yeah, but just that.
She keeps adding the word love in, and I keep saying that's the center.
Love's might be more fun, but no. But I think that's got to be a big thing of how part of our branding, right? Right. Just calling it a Love Center just may turn some people really off.
What about Healing Center?
Well, it has other connotations.
Jesse?
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep this to 2 minutes, but I feel very strongly about it, and I'm giving you guys as our leaders this advice. And for the rest of us who are the rank and file, I feel it's really important, picking up on what you said, that we have a name for this as soon as possible, and we use it over and over again. I've been involved in politics and getting people elected since I was 12, and messaging is what Republicans do really well. They get a name and they repeat it over and over and over again until you're sick of it.
Whoa,
We
whoa,
need
whoa,
a 2-sentence description of what this is, that we hear in the pulpit every week, in the newsletter, we hear from all of your mouths, man. It's gotta be the same message. And we've gotta be on the same page about what that message is and what the name is going forward. Because we have to convince ourselves, our congregation, to buy into this as much as a community.
Good point, thank you, Jesse.
So instead of love center, the anti-hate center?
We're
I'm still thinking about.
gonna get a lot of
As
attention.
Mike said earlier, let's not get down into the weeds of specifics.
I'm not even against
This
the
is
love
a
center.
concept of a plan. Go
I'm
ahead.
not even against the love center, but it's the first time I heard anything that was actually a name.
Right.
So we need a name.
Okay, so I see a couple, I'm gonna go back to Chris, because you said you were a two-part, and the funding is a very, obviously, one of the most important. The first round of funding is going through internal UUA funding, like money that's within our community. Because anybody who knows anything, being a 501c3 as a congregation or a church, you can't go, that's limits who's gonna give you money, because it's a religious organization. And, you know, we're kind of, the UUA wants real life working role models of building these things. So they want to invest in them and just watch it work. So that's going to be our pitch. You know, we'll be the guinea pigs, or we'll be I want us to be the cover of UU World next year, you know, and have them highlight our congregation and what we're doing. So then that idea of, at first I was thinking it was just extension of our programming, but that idea of establishing another 501c3 as a community center is critical, because that will open up so much other funding and partnerships. We didn't really talk about community partnerships, but that's another way of, when you band together, you have a bigger impact. Like the Compass Center, you know, we would partner with other groups that could run our space, do programming, give us money, you know, and we would support them too. So, well, Kai's gonna have her hand up, and then Robert, and then
No.
Patricia.
Yeah, I was just raising my hand because Kai had her.
I know.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, you keep saying love at the center, and the center is essentially for healing, so why don't we call it the soul center? Because our souls are going to heal and replenish themselves, plus the soul's in everyone. You don't need to be in a specific culture to have a soul. So, I don't know, the soul center sounds like a spa day with like wrappings around your heart or something.
I think this is work that we had actually talked about, because I remember, well, we met yesterday, and I was saying, oh, sorry, sorry. I was just saying, like, you know, we can talk about this, but there's probably something that we're missing. And so that's why it's probably going to be important, one, so that, you know, while this is separate from First UUPB in some ways, this is a First UUPB initiative. So therefore, we need to have input from folks to help us figure out what this is. And then also for very things like this, like, help us think, what are some offerings that the community around us is asking for? What are things that we can name this thing? And so the advisory committee came to us very quickly. And I think that that's something that is going to be a very sort of next step thing, is finding those key voices amongst our community that can help us think through what this looks like and how it kind of feels as we go into September and beyond.
And just another thing, I know, sorry, I know we try to shy away from the term church, but as somebody who like was shunned from the church at the age of 10 and like I lost my faith and everything, it's so healing just to tell people, oh, I'm going to church Sunday, and then they look at me like, what? You're going to church? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to church. I love it, and I start telling them about it. So I know we try to stay away from that, but a lot of us are looking for that church setting. We miss it. I miss the Awanas and like
Yeah.
Vacation Bible School. That was the first group setting I was in that wasn't school. So,
Yeah, and just being able to form those key relationships, and yeah, exactly what we talked about before. And that's still possible at church, but so much of what you just said, like people with negative connotations, people that don't know us, people that drive by and they're like, oh, that's that Presbyterian church?
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that. It happens constantly, that folks show up at the door and like knock outside of my office and they're actually looking for First Presbyterian down the street or something. It's just like, I think that what this allows us to do is be church in a different way, that where people that do have the hesitancy of coming on Sunday morning can feel welcome and can feel like they have a place to start. And that is one thing that I do think, and this is something that the advisory committee and we can talk about together, but I do think that a specific identity to the center is necessary. Compass has a very specific identity in the community that they serve. The Jewish Center that's opening in Palm Beach Gardens has a very specific identity to the community that they serve. I think that we're looking for that specific identity, and David gave voice to it. It's the people who are like, I don't know what this world is anymore, and I don't know how to start making it a better place. And that's what the community, that's what the center's on. Yeah.
Robert.
So, I guess I'm gonna give some advice like Jesse, who's more off on. But I've heard this talk, as being on the board, I've heard this talk a lot, and I hear, I don't know, roughly half the time, this is what we're gonna do for the community, and then this is what the community's gonna do for us. And I suggest we stop talking at all about what the community's gonna do for us. This should be entirely an outward-looking thing, and then if we get benefits from it, that's great. And not that internally we can't say, we hope that happens, or what can we do that might facilitate that, but anything we say, anything we put out, talks we're having, presentations should always be about, this is what, not that I didn't hear that a lot from you guys, but I also heard smatterings of that maybe our membership will grow, or this will be more, and I think that's a danger because that's looking in again. And the whole idea behind this is to change that inward looking to the outward looking. So much like our branding and our name should be consistent, so should our goal and our aim be consistent.
It's the first time I heard that this would be a separate entity. A new 503C, 501C. Would that have to be permitted by the town? And would we be zoned for something?
These are all things to explore.
501c3 doesn't have anything to do with code. That's the other thing, yeah.
Okay. And the idea that we were gonna have a separate one,
It's
I
a separate
I just learned it
business.
yesterday.
It's a business.
No,
So-
it's not.
But it's using our
It's a
space,
nonprofit, yeah.
right? It's not a separate
So a
building.
nonprofit,
but you already have facilities.
you've gotta go to the town, I think.
No.
You get what, a business license?
Well, if we did a after-school program or something, wouldn't there be?
Yeah, there's
I like the idea of a youth
Thanks. Yeah,
center.
yeah,
I like that angle here. We don't do the drugs and the other stuff, so there's longevity to that.
We're not gonna do the drugs?
See, we have to.
I'm out.
So,
Oh, yeah.
something I think everybody here needs to be very cognizant of. You know, we're gonna walk away and tomorrow morning we all go to our congregation, our church. And it's our job we're gonna be talking to people. As a board member, I'm always talking to people about what our visions are. One thing we have to be very cognizant of, people are very concerned where their money goes a lot of times. So we have some congregants who are very specific on where their money goes. We have to be careful that we don't alienate people who want to give to the church versus give to the love center or whatever, we're gonna call it, the WOPE center. Okay? And then also, how do we make sure that people understand that if we start doing this year, and then eventually, whether it's a separate 503C or whatever we do, how do we know where the money is going and how is it delegated? It will turn some people on, they might want to give more. It will turn some people off, and they might be very worried where it's going. right? Because it specifically, hey, I want this church because I believe in this church. You know, they have that focus. So we have to be very cognizant when we go out to the rest of our congregation of, hey, this is a evolution, I think was the word you used, Kai, and wrote it down on the table, right? It's not a revolution of where we're splitting.
That's right.
But people will, their mind will go there long before you think they will, right? So be very careful on how we broach this to the congregation.
This is the work of the advisory committee and also us coming up with a name and a mission and a vision and clarity and transparency concept. Because it is a evolution that first comes with really using our existing programming and presenting it in a different way before we even talk about a separate 501c3 or, we may or may, there's, like I said, there's so many possibilities. I don't think there are no decisions made. Just the decision that I think exploring it as a community, are we all going to do this at this point? Harry?
I would just add, I didn't hear anything today that said we're doing anything less than what we're doing now. What we're talking about is adding. And I think back to Chris's concern, and I don't disagree with him, but the focus on not taking away what we have, not stopping what we're doing, but adding to it to grow and expand our programming, it is less threatening than saying we're changing.
I think
Change is a four-letter word. And so,
what does change mean?
Exactly, I mean, we had that discussion.
Yeah.
So again, I haven't heard a thing today that said, we're not gonna have Sunday services, or we're not gonna do what we're doing today that makes us unique and fun and interesting.
What we're really trying to do is figure out a different way to utilize our space.
And
That's
this-
really what we're.
And so part of that's messaging.
That's right.
And I think that's what
Yeah,
someone
and
else
just
said.
to speak to what, something that Robert said, but also something that Chris has given voice to, which I think is really important, which is that we have an established community that's, been here for a long time. And that is that, it's not our goal to change or get rid of first UUPB or anything like that. What I consistently hear from members of first UUPB is we want to grow. Well, this is how we grow, by helping people with what it is that they need, right? Not us making them become us and come into our ranks. It's us saying, what do you need? We have a center here where we can help you, right? So,
I just wanted to share, that we had a bit of a delving into that yesterday about, we've been here 75 years. We have an established spiritual community, and we are Unitarian Universalists. We have to, continuing to meet the needs. Often let's talk about meeting all the ages and stages and valuing everyone that's part of the community. There are people that are older adults, wise sages, that have been members for 40 years. Yes, there's programs and services and the spirituality for that. Families need a different kind of approach. Young adults want something different. So it's kind of like, I agree, Harry, it's really expanding. It's really just relaunching or expanding what we're doing to reach the people that are not here. Abundance. Bob?
We have to recognize that our congregation is older and might not be as ready to change as what you're talking about.
But again, I think it's just
We
adding
don't
to
wanna,
what
we
we have.
don't wanna lose those people.
We're not losing, we're adding to it, that's the selling point.
Some-
You're saying we
But
might
it
lose
depends on their
people because of-
perception.
Right.
It's more of like a polishing.
Patricia
Put 'em in the
and
can.
Lois.
No, I think you had your hand up.
Wait,
First.
thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So a Greek term is xeno. It's the root of xenophobia, right? So as a xeno, as someone's new to your midst, what this feels like is A flows into B. And when you stand in the pulpit on a Sunday and say, "In service is our mission," this flows from that mission.
Amen.
And so it doesn't feel at all like change, but rather
and evolution of what you already have. So that's sort of my perception of what you're trying to accomplish.
And speaking of that evolution, right? If we're thinking that most of our congregants are elderly, the reality is that, you know, we are here for some time, but hopefully, as we do the work, other people will come up to take our place and continue doing the work that we're doing. And the only way that we can do that is if we have new people. So
We have to explain it.
Yeah.
What time is it?
Time to go. Wait, time for
5:02.
Robert, he's on the agenda, 5:05.
Yeah.
You're up.
Well.
Robert?
Abruptly move into that. However, I just realized I walked out of the house with only half of the printout, so maybe if you're a group, there's two things. You're gonna start this on this side, that's the questions and the little concept, and then this, so these are the timelines. If you can share with somebody if you need it, that's just the overview of the timelines.
This is all a big thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Robert, you're up. So, well,
I don't need-
we're gonna close it out with a little bit of a centering.
Oh, good.
And I did have we were gonna do a closing exercise of, if you could pick, you know, we all have things we wanna learn about, or things we wanna do, or like, we would come to a community center for this.
You need any more?
Like, just think about, you can write it on the paper, two or three things, if we could offer anything, and anything, you know, the community you think might need or that you would need, what are two or three things that you would think of? So kind of think about that, and maybe I'll ask that to be written down as we leave. But for now, I appreciate everybody's time and staying a little bit late. It's been a great afternoon. I am so jazzed, and I'm so glad we have so many people here. So I appreciate everybody. Let's give ourselves a round of applause for giving up a weekend day. I am truly grateful to Lois, Kai, Phoebe, Faith for giving up an afternoon and saying, how much longer is this gonna be? Where are we gonna hold now? But that perspective,
That's what board
this,
meetings are for.
the people that are not here yet, you are giving voice to that, and I appreciate your involvement, because you're the future of who we're trying to reach. So, helping build that is great, and all the rest of us that are too. But you know, I mean, we you know, well, Patricia, Andy, you know, Rona, we have newer people, so this is great.